My name is Caitlin, and at 34 I was drowning. Every day I hauled grocery bags home after 12-hour shifts while changing buses 3 times across town. My husband Jack had been horizontal on our living room couch for 2 years straight, watching TV while I worked myself into exhaustion. Our savings were gone, my body was failing, and resentment had replaced love in our marriage. Then one rainy evening, bus number 42 changed everything. A conversation between strangers revealed the truth I had been too tired to see. Before I share what I overheard that night, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own home. I never imagined my life would become an endless marathon of obligation and exhaustion. 10 years ago, I graduated with a business degree full of ambition and plans to climb the corporate ladder. My parents had worked hard to put me through college, the first in our family to attend. I had dreams of executive positions, maybe even starting my own company someday. The world seemed full of possibility. Then I met Jack at my friend Alison's barbecue. He arrived with a cooler of craft beers and a smile that lit up his entire face. At 32, he was 6 years older than me, established in his career as a construction supervisor, confident in a way that drew me in immediately. We talked for hours that day, and when he asked for my number, my heart practically leaped out of my chest. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Jack showed up at my apartment with flowers and surprised me with tickets to concerts. He cooked elaborate meals and told me stories about growing up in a small town in Ohio. He worked hard during the week managing crews of 20 men, but always made time for us on weekends. "You're the most fascinating woman I've ever met," he would tell me, running his fingers through my hair. "I love how your mind works." Within 8 months, he proposed on a hiking trip, getting down on one knee at the summit as the sun rose. I said yes without hesitation. We planned a small ceremony in my parents' backyard, nothing extravagant because we were saving for a house. The first years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We found a modest 3-bedroom in a good school district with a small yard and friendly neighbors. Jack worked overtime to help with the mortgage, and I secured a position as an administrative assistant at Westbrook Financial. The pay wasn't amazing, but the benefits were good, and there seemed to be opportunity for advancement. Emma came along in our second year of marriage, a calicky baby who kept us up all night but melted our hearts with her first smile. Lucas followed 2 years later. Our family felt complete, and despite the chaos of raising young children while both working full-time, we managed. We were tired but happy, taking turns with midnight feedings and weekend activities. Jack coached Lucas's T-ball team, and I volunteered at Emma's preschool when I could. "We are a good team," Jack would say, high-fiving me after we successfully navigated a dual tantrum situation at the grocery store. Then came the economic downturn. The construction industry was hit particularly hard. Jack's company struggled for months, cutting hours, then salaries before finally declaring bankruptcy. The day he came home at 2:00 in the afternoon with a cardboard box of desk items, I knew our lives were about to change. "It's just temporary," he assured me, his eyes betraying his confidence. "Companies are still building. I'll find something else in no time." I believed him completely. Jack had always been resourceful and hardworking. He had contacts throughout the industry, recommendations from previous clients, and years of experience. Finding another position might take a few weeks, maybe a month or 2, but certainly not long. Those first months, Jack approached his job search with enthusiasm. He updated his resume, called former colleagues, attended industry networking events. He went on several interviews, always returning with stories about the companies and optimism about his chances. "They said they'll let me know next week" became his regular refrain. But the calls never came. The construction market had completely collapsed in our region. Companies weren't just not hiring, they were laying people off by the dozens. Jack's former co-workers were taking jobs in retail or fast food just to make ends meet. 6 months in, his enthusiasm began to wane. He started sleeping later, spending more time watching television, checking job boards less frequently. When I gently asked about his progress one evening, he snapped at me. "Do you think I'm not trying?" "There are no jobs, Caitlin, none." I backed off, understanding his frustration and wounded pride. Jack had always defined himself by his work ethic and ability to provide. This prolonged unemployment was destroying his self-image. By the 1-year mark, a worrying transformation had taken place. The man who once bounded out of bed at 5:30 was now sleeping until noon. Job applications happened maybe once a week, if at all. When I suggested he consider positions outside construction, retail customer service, anything to help with bills, he dismissed the idea. "Those aren't real jobs." "I'm not flipping burgers at 40. His doctor diagnosed depression and recommended therapy, possibly medication. Jack attended one session before declaring it worthless psychobabble. The prescription remained unfilled on our kitchen counter until I threw it away. Meanwhile, our financial situation grew increasingly dire. We had some savings, but with only my income it evaporated quickly. I asked for overtime at work, then a weekend shift. My boss, sensing my desperation, piled on additional responsibilities without additional compensation. I took it all without complaint. Terrified of losing the only income keeping our family afloat, our home life transformed completely. I now woke at 5 each morning, prepared lunches for the children, laid out their clothes, and left breakfast for everyone before catching the 6:15 bus to work. After a full day at the office, I would shop for groceries, then take multiple buses home, arriving around 7:30 to cook dinner, help with homework, and tackle laundry and cleaning. Jack would be where I left him on the couch, surrounded by snack wrappers and empty soda cans. When I asked for help, there was always a reason: he couldn't, backache, headache, exhaustion, despite doing nothing all day. I applied for 3 jobs today, he would say though. The laptop showed only Netflix in the browser history. I'm waiting to hear back. The children noticed the change in our household. 8-year-old Emma became increasingly withdrawn while 6-year-old Lucas acted out at school. Their teachers called with concerns I had no time or energy to properly address. Our savings account hit zero. Credit card debt mounted. Mortgage payments were late, then partial, then missed entirely. Letters from the bank arrived with increasing frequency. I hid them from Jack, not wanting to deal with his defensive outbursts. I was carrying our entire family alone, and I was breaking under the weight. My alarm blared at 5 in the morning, jolting me from a dream where I was drowning in quicksand. The metaphor wasn't lost on me as I forced my aching body out of bed. Jack snored beside me, having finally come to bed at 3 after a late-night movie marathon. He wouldn't stir for hours. The wooden floor felt cold against my bare feet as I shuffled to the bathroom. The face that greeted me in the mirror looked like it belonged to someone a decade older. Dark circles under my eyes, skin, sallow hair limp. I barely recognized myself anymore. The morning routine had become mechanical. Shower for 4 minutes exactly. Dress in one of 5 rotation outfits. Make 4 sandwiches, 2 for the kids' lunches and 2 for my own lunch and dinner at work. Set out cereal boxes and bowls. Check backpacks for homework and permission slips. Wake Emma and Lucas, coaxing them through their own morning routines while simultaneously brewing coffee and ironing a shirt for an afternoon meeting. "Mom, I need $25 for the field trip today," Emma announced, handing me a crumpled form that was due yesterday. "My science project is due, and I need a poster board," Lucas whined, milk dribbling down his chin. I closed my eyes, calculating our checking account balance in my head. $17 until payday. Another problem to solve later. "I'll figure it out, sweetie. Lucas, I'll pick up a poster board during my lunch break." "Now hurry, Mrs. Peterson is driving you today." As the kids grabbed their backpacks, I glanced at the couch where Jack would relocate when he eventually woke up. The indent of his body was permanent. Now the cushions worn into the exact shape of his lanky frame. "Kiss Daddy goodbye when he wakes up," I told the kids, knowing he wouldn't be conscious until long after they'd left. The morning bus was crowded with other tired workers. I squeezed into a seat, balancing my purse and tote bag on my lap. 45 minutes later, I arrived at Westbrook Financial, where I'd been an administrative assistant for 9 years. My desk was already piled with folders when I arrived. Additional work from Diana, the marketing manager, who knew I wouldn't say no. "Caitlin, thank God you're here," she exclaimed, dropping another stack of papers. "The Johnston presentation got moved up to tomorrow, and I need all these reorganized by section and priority. Oh, and can you grab coffee for the team meeting? Thanks, you're a lifesaver." She disappeared before I could respond. I swallowed my resentment and got to work. During my supposed lunch break, I ran to the store for Lucas's poster board, then worked through a sandwich at my desk while formatting spreadsheets. At 3, I took a 5-minute bathroom break where I splashed water on my face and called the kids to make sure they'd gotten home safely. "Dad's playing video games," Emma reported. "He said he's too busy to help with my math homework." "Put him on the phone," I said, trying to keep my voice level. After several moments of Emma calling for him, Jack finally picked up. "What? I'm in the middle of something," he said, irritation evident. "The kids need help with homework." "Jack, could you please take 30 minutes to assist them? I'm swamped at work. I've got a killer headache, Caitlin, been fighting it all day. Plus, I had a phone interview this morning that went terribly, so I'm not exactly in the mood to explain fractions." The lie was so obvious it made my stomach clench. There had been no phone interview. The house phone would have shown a call history, and his cell phone was disconnected months ago as a cost-cutting measure. "The children need their father," I said quietly. "They need dinner and clean clothes too, but I don't see you handling that at the moment either." He shot back, then hung up. I stood in the bathroom stall, hands shaking with rage and exhaustion. A knock on the door startled me. Caitlin Marks, looking for the quarterly projections, called Diana's assistant. Back at my desk, I discovered Mark wanted the projections completely reformatted from what had been requested originally. It would take hours. I sent a quick text to our neighbor Sophia asking if she could check on the kids and maybe help with homework. She had done this before, a kindness I couldn't adequately repay on our tight budget. By 7, my eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets. I finally closed down my computer and headed to the grocery store, mentally calculating the cheapest meals I could prepare for the week. The store was nearly empty, harsh fluorescent lights, highlighting my exhaustion as I compared prices on pasta sauce and counted out exact change for ground turkey. The bus ride home involved 2 transfers, each one extending my commute as I waited on cold benches with grocery bags cutting into my fingers. Normally, I would use this time to close my eyes for a few precious moments of rest, but tonight the mortgage statement in my purse kept my mind racing. We were 3 months behind, and the latest letter included the word foreclosure for the first time. When I finally unlocked our front door at 8:30, the house smelled of burnt microwave popcorn. Jack was precisely where I expected, on the couch, controller in hand, some war game blasting on the television. Empty soda cans and chip bags surrounded him like offerings to a slothful god. "Kids in bed?" I asked, struggling to keep judgment from my voice. "Lucas is Emma's reading or something," he mumbled without looking up. I sat down the groceries and found Emma curled up on her bed, math workbook open but clearly untouched. "Did you finish your homework, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting beside her despite my desire to collapse. "I tried, but I don't understand it," she said in a small voice. "Dad said he'd help later, but then he started playing his game." I spent the next 40 minutes working through math problems with Emma unpacking groceries during her calculation attempts. By the time she understood the concept, it was well past her bedtime. After tucking her in, I returned to the kitchen to prepare lunches for tomorrow and tackle the mountain of dishes in the sink. Jack wandered in as I was elbowed deep in soapy water. "Anything good for dinner?" he asked, opening the refrigerator. The casual entitlement in his voice nearly broke me. "I haven't had time to make anything. There's sandwich stuff." He made a disappointed noise. I was thinking maybe we could order pizza. With what money I wanted to scream instead, I said, "We can't afford takeout, Jack, you know that." "Jesus, I was just suggesting it. No need to bite my head off." He slammed the refrigerator door and stalked back to the living room. After finishing the dishes, I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread before me. Electric was past due. Water would be next. Cable and internet had already been reduced to the minimum package. There was simply not enough money, and no amount of budgeting wizardry could change that mathematical reality. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Natalie. "Haven't seen you in forever. Girls' night this weekend." I hadn't seen my friends in months. Between work, children, and household management, there was no time. More importantly, there was no energy. The thought of socializing, of having to explain Jack's ongoing unemployment or pretend everything was fine, was overwhelming. Swamped with work. "Rain check." I replied the same response I'd been giving for almost a year. The next morning at work, my boss called me into his office. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought perhaps the extra hours and additional responsibilities had been noticed. Maybe there would be a raise, a promotion, anything to ease our financial burden. "Caitlin, you've been with us for nearly a decade." He began, folding his hands on his desk. "And years next month," I confirmed, "and you've been reliable, hardworking. The team depends on you." My heart lifted slightly. This was sounding promising. "That's why I wanted to speak with you directly about the senior administrative position that's opening next quarter. I know you've expressed interest." "Yes, I have. I believe my experience and dedication make me well qualified." He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Under normal circumstances, you'd be a strong candidate. But the position requires someone who can be flexible with occasional travel and late nights." "I can be flexible," I said quickly, desperation creeping into my voice. "With your home situation, your husband's unemployment, and your children's needs, I just don't see how you could commit to what we need." The unfairness of it hit me like a physical blow. I was being denied advancement because I was already overburdened, because I needed the job too much to leave, as Diana had once tactlessly observed. My dedication was being used against me. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. Not really. That evening, loaded down with groceries and the weight of another professional disappointment, I missed my usual bus. Rain poured from a lean sky as I waited for the next one, water seeping through my worn shoes. When bus number 42 finally arrived, I was soaked, exhausted, and fighting back tears of frustration. The bus was more crowded than usual because of the rain. Commuters shook water from umbrellas and raincoats, creating a symphony of droplets against metal flooring. I squeezed past damp bodies, balancing grocery bags while trying not to bump anyone with my purse. The usual seats near the front were occupied, forcing me toward the back where the engine noise would at least drown out my sniffling. I found a spot behind two women deep in conversation. They hadn't noticed me. Their voices low, but still audible above the rumble of the bus and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but as I settled my bags on the floor between my feet, their words began to register. 2 years now, the woman closest to the window was saying. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed with short auburn hair. At first I believed him when he said the job market was impossible. I mean, the economy was bad, right, but eventually I realized he'd stopped trying months ago. My head jerked up involuntarily. She could have been describing Jack. He had a new excuse every day, she continued. Back pain was the main one, though doctors found nothing wrong. Then it was headaches, insomnia, general fatigue, but never too tired to play video games or watch sports all day. The second woman nodded thoughtfully. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and an elegant pantsuit. And you were handling everything. Work, children, house, finances, everything. I'd come home exhausted after working overtime, and he'd ask what was for dinner as if it were still my responsibility despite being home all day. The dishes would be piled up, laundry untouched. When I asked for help, there was always some reason he couldn't. I froze grocery bags, forgotten at my feet. This stranger was articulating my daily reality with uncanny precision. The older woman sighed. What you're describing is unfortunately common in my practice. I'm a therapist specializing in relationship dynamics, and I see this pattern regularly. You mean other women are living this nightmare too? Auburn hair asked, more than you'd think. What you're experiencing combines several psychological patterns. First, there's what we call learned helplessness, where someone has convinced themselves they're incapable of improving their situation, so they stop trying. That sounds like depression. Auburn hair said it can be related to depression. Yes, but there's an important distinction. In pure depression, the person typically recognizes their impairment and feels genuine distress about it. What you're describing includes elements of what we call strategic incompetence. Strategic incompetence. The term sent a chill down my spine. It's when someone consciously or unconsciously performs tasks poorly or claims inability so others will stop asking them to do those tasks. It's particularly common in household labor dynamics. If someone loads the dishwasher so badly that dishes come out dirty, eventually their partner stops asking and just does it themselves. Auburn hair leaned forward. Are you saying my husband is faking inability? Not necessarily faking in the deliberate sense. These patterns often operate below conscious awareness. But ask yourself, does his inability seem selective? Is he too exhausted to take out the trash but able to play video games for hours? Too foggy-headed to remember school forms but perfectly capable of remembering sports statistics? Yes, exactly that. Auburn hair's voice rose slightly before she caught herself. The therapist nodded. Another component is enabling behavior. When we continuously compensate for someone's failure to meet responsibilities, we inadvertently reinforce their behavior. They experience no negative consequences for their inaction because we're absorbing all the impact. So I'm making it worse by picking up his slack. You're caught in a difficult cycle. If you don't pick up the slack, your children suffer, bills go unpaid. But continuing as you are clearly isn't sustainable for you. I found myself nodding along, hanging on every word. This conversation was speaking directly to my situation in ways I couldn't articulate myself. The third element, the therapist continued, is what some researchers call secondary gain. This refers to the hidden benefits someone might get from maintaining a problem, behavior, or condition. Your husband may be unconsciously clinging to his helpless state because it frees him from responsibility while giving him total control of his time. While I have none, Auburn hair said bitterly, exactly, and crucially. As long as you're exhausted from carrying the full load, you have no energy to enforce changes or potentially leave the relationship. Your overfunction enables his underfunction in a self-perpetuating cycle. The bus lurched to a stop, momentarily interrupting the conversation. A few passengers exited and several more boarded, shaking rain from coats. The women lowered their voices slightly as the bus continued its route. So, what do I do? Auburn hair asked, desperation in her tone mirroring what I felt daily. First, recognize this isn't just about unemployment or even depression. It's about power dynamics and accountability. You need to establish clear boundaries about what you will and won't continue to shoulder alone. I've tried talking to him. He either gets defensive or agrees to help but never follows through. Talking isn't enough at this point. You need concrete consequences. For example, stop doing his laundry. Don't shop for his favorite snacks. Redirect money from non-essentials he enjoys to hiring help for yourself, even if it's just a house cleaning service once a month. He'll be furious. Probably when we change patterns, we get resistance. The key is holding firm while making it clear that you're willing to be a partner but not a caretaker to a capable adult. What if he still refuses to change? The therapist paused. Then you have valuable information for deciding your next steps. Sometimes the clearest answer comes from asking yourself if nothing changes for another 5 years. Can you live like this? Is this the example you want to set for your children about relationships? Auburn hair was quiet for a moment. It feels selfish to consider leaving. It's not selfish to require partnership in a partnership, the therapist said gently. The question isn't whether you're willing to support a partner through genuine hardship. You've proven that. The question is whether you're willing to sacrifice your well-being indefinitely for someone who's capable of change but choosing not to. The bus announcement system chimed, announcing the next stop. With a jolt, I realized it was mine. I'd been so engrossed in their conversation that I'd nearly missed it. Gathering my bags hastily, I squeezed past other passengers, almost tripping in my hurry. As the bus pulled away, I stood in the rain, grocery bags cutting into my fingers, the women's conversation replaying in my mind. Strategic incompetence enabling behaviors, secondary gain. The concepts swirled together, illuminating the past 2 years in a harsh new light. What if Jack wasn't struggling to find work but had stopped trying? What if his helplessness wasn't inability but unwillingness? What if my exhausting efforts to keep our family afloat were actually allowing him to remain comfortably on that couch? The 3-block walk home felt different somehow. With each heavy step through puddles, my perspective was shifting. The rain soaked through my jacket, but I barely noticed. By the time I reached our front porch, I wasn't just carrying groceries. I was carrying a completely new understanding of my marriage. I paused on our front porch, key in hand, suddenly reluctant to enter my own home. Through the window, I could see exactly what I expected. Jack sprawled on the couch television, casting blue light across his unshaven face. Our children sat at the dining table attempting homework without supervision. The scene was so familiar, it was almost a caricature. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside, setting the groceries on the kitchen counter. "Mom's home," Lucas called out, running to hug me around the waist. Emma looked up from her notebook with relief. "Can you help me with my science questions?" Dad said. "He doesn't remember 5th grade science." Jack raised a hand in lazy acknowledgement of my arrival without taking his eyes from the screen. "There's nothing for dinner," he announced as though this were my failure rather than his. I moved through our evening routine on autopilot, helping with homework, preparing a simple pasta meal, checking backpacks for tomorrow. But something had changed. I was watching myself and Jack with new awareness, cataloguing each interaction through the lens of what I'd heard on the bus. When Jack complained about back pain while I asked him to set the table, I noticed how quickly the pain vanished when his favorite show came on. When he claimed to be too foggy to help Lucas with simple math, but recited detailed sports statistics minutes later, the contradiction was glaring. How had I not seen this pattern before? After the children were in bed, I sat at our desktop computer in the corner of the living room. Jack snores, providing background noise from the couch. I typed "learned helplessness relationships" into the search bar, and page after page of articles appeared. I read about enabling behaviors, codependency, and the concept of overfunctioning while a partner underfunctions. One article described my life with eerie accuracy. The overfunctioner becomes increasingly exhausted and resentful while the underfunctioner becomes increasingly incapable and dependent. The dynamic serves to keep both parties stuck, one too overwhelmed to create change, the other too comfortable to want it. I found an online forum for partners of unemployed spouses. The stories mirrored mine with such precision that tears sprang to my eyes. One woman described sneaking into the bathroom to cry between meetings at work. Another detailed calculating how much debt she could manage if she left. A third shared her realization that her husband's job search consisted of sending a single application weekly to maintain the appearance of trying. I created an anonymous account and posted my situation. Responses flooded in within hours. "He won't change while you're managing everything. Ask yourself, if your son grew up to treat his wife this way, would you be okay with that? This isn't just about unemployment, it's about respect and partnership. You're modeling martyrdom for your daughter. Is that what you want for her future?" That last comment hit like a physical blow. What was I teaching Emma about her value and what she should accept from a partner? What was I showing Lucas about a man's responsibilities to his family? The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. After getting the children to school, I sat in my car in the parking lot and called my sister Lauren. Caitlin, is everything okay? Her concern was immediate. We hadn't spoken properly in months. Quick texts and holiday gatherings were all our busy lives had allowed. No, I admitted, voice cracking. Nothing is okay. I poured out everything. Financial struggles, Jack's 2-year Cooch residence, my growing resentment, and finally the bus conversation that had illuminated it all. There was a long pause after I finished speaking. I've been worried about this, Lauren finally said. The few times I've visited, I've noticed how Jack always has an excuse when you ask for help. I didn't want to interfere, but honestly it looks like manipulation from the outside. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, hurt that she'd seen what I couldn't. Would you have heard it 6 months ago, or would you have defended him? She was right. I would have explained away his behavior, made excuses, insisted he was trying. I had been so invested in the narrative of supporting my struggling husband that I couldn't see the reality. What do I do now? I asked. First, you need professional advice, both psychological and financial. This isn't just an emotional problem, it's a practical one too. Lauren recommended her therapist, who fortunately accepted my insurance. I made an emergency appointment for that afternoon. Next, I visited my bank and had a brutally honest conversation with a financial advisor about our situation. Based on your income alone, keeping your house will be extremely difficult, she told me gently. If your husband doesn't contribute soon, you'll need to consider downsizing or other arrangements. The reality of potentially losing our home crystallized the severity of our situation. This wasn't just about emotional labor anymore. Our children's stability was at risk. The therapist's office was a calm oasis compared to the chaos in my mind. Dr. Melissa Winters listened attentively as I explained my situation, occasionally taking notes, but mostly maintaining steady eye contact that made me feel truly heard. What you're describing is unfortunately common, she said, when I finished unconsciously echoing the bus therapist. You've been carrying the entire physical, financial, and emotional load of your family, while your husband has abdicated responsibility. I enabled it, I admitted. I kept picking up the slack out of necessity. Your children needed to be fed, bills needed to be paid. The question is, what happens now that you recognize the dynamic? We spent the session outlining a strategy. Dr. Winters helped me see that I needed both immediate relief and long-term change. You need to determine what your boundaries are, she explained. What are you no longer willing to do? What consequences are you prepared to enforce? And crucially, what is your timeline for seeing change before making bigger decisions? That evening, after the children were asleep, I sat at our kitchen table with a notebook, mapping out a comprehensive plan, financial assessment. I calculated exactly what we needed monthly, what I could earn with potential overtime, and what Jack would need to contribute. Minimum expectations. I created a list of basic responsibilities Jack needed to resume. Job applications, household chores, child care participation, timeline, 30 days for initial changes, 90 days for secured employment or significant progress. Support system, people I could rely on during this transition, Lauren, my parents' trusted friends. Worst case scenario, if nothing changed, what would separation look like? Where would we live? How would custody work? What legal steps would be needed? The last section was the hardest to write, but Dr. Winters had emphasized the importance of having a clear picture of all options. Hope for change, but prepare for resistance, she had advised. Over the next week, I methodically put pieces in place. I opened a separate bank account in my name only and redirected my next paycheck there. I researched affordable apartments in our school district. I consulted with a lawyer about potential separation, learning about the process and my rights. I arranged for the children to stay with Lauren the following weekend. Each step was terrifying but also strangely empowering. For 2 years I had been reacting to crisis after crisis, scrambling to keep our family functional. Now I was taking deliberate action, creating options rather than just surviving. The night before my planned confrontation with Jack, I stood in our bathroom, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was tired, but resolute, fear in her eyes, but determination in the set of her jaw. You deserve partnership, I told my reflection. The children deserve better. Even Jack deserves the chance to be better than this. I rehearsed what I would say, anticipating his likely responses based on past patterns. I knew there would be denial, defensiveness, perhaps accusations that I was overreacting or being unsupportive. I prepared counterarguments, specific examples, clear expectations. For the first time in years, I felt something beyond exhaustion and resentment. I felt ready. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside our home. I had dropped Emma and Lucas at Lawrence the previous evening, telling them they were having a special weekend with their aunt, while Mommy and Daddy had grown-up talks. Their excitement at the sleepover had been tinged with confusion. We rarely spent nights apart, but Lauren had distracted them with promises of movies and baking. Jack had barely registered their absence, grunting acknowledgement when I mentioned they'd be gone for the weekend. Now he sat at our kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, scrolling through sports highlights on his phone. I took a deep breath and sat across from him. We need to talk, Jack, about everything. He glanced up briefly. Can it wait? The Celtics playoff recap is on in 10. No, it can't wait. This is important. Something in my tone must have registered because he set down his phone with a sigh. What's wrong now? Is it the Shaw account I told you to stop stressing about work on weekends? The dismissiveness in his voice nearly derailed my resolve. This was his standard tactic, minimizing my concerns, making my stress seem like a character flaw rather than a reasonable response to our circumstances. This isn't about work. It's about us, about what's happened to our marriage over the past 2 years. His posture stiffened. Here we go again. Another lecture about me finding a job. I told you I'm trying. The market is stop. My voice was firm enough to surprise us both. I've been tracking your browser history, Jack. In the past month, you've submitted exactly 2 job applications. 2. You spend an average of 7 hours daily on video games and sports sites. His face flushed red. You're spying on me. What the hell, Caitlin? I needed to know the truth. And the truth is, you stopped genuinely trying to find work over a year ago. That's you have no idea how hard it is out there. My industry collapsed. There are other industries. There's retail, customer service, delivery services, dozens of options. That might not be your dream job but would help support your family. So I should just take any menial position, destroy my career trajectory, work alongside teenagers for minimum wage. I leaned forward. Our mortgage is 3 months behind. We're eating ramen noodles for dinner while you complain about job quality. And yes, sometimes supporting your family means taking work that isn't ideal. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against linoleum. I'm not having this conversation. You clearly don't respect what I'm going through. As he turned toward the living room, toward his sanctuary couch, I played my first card. The internet and cable will be disconnected on Monday. He froze mid-step. What? I can't afford them anymore. My salary barely covers the mortgage and utilities as it is. He turned slowly. You can't do that. I need internet for job searching. The library has free internet 6 blocks from here. They're open 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. His eyes narrowed. Is this some kind of manipulation, punishing me because you're stressed about money? It's not punishment, Jack, it's reality. We are drowning financially while you spend your days consuming services we can't afford. He paced the kitchen, running hands through his hair. So what you want me to take some dead-end job stocking shelves? Is that your big solution? I want you to contribute in any way because right now I'm carrying everything. Work, children, house, finances, while you contribute nothing. Nothing. His voice rose. I'm here every day with the kids. Being physically present isn't the same as parenting. Emma and Lucas come home to an empty refrigerator and a father who's too busy to help with homework but never too busy for video games. His face twisted with anger. You think you're so perfect, the martyr who works herself to exhaustion. Maybe if you weren't such a control freak I could actually help around here. I had anticipated this, the deflection, making his inaction my fault. In the past I would have backed down, apologized, taken on responsibility for his feelings. Not today. I've prepared this, I said, calmly sliding a folder across the table. It outlines our current financial situation, minimum monthly requirements, and a list of responsibilities that need to be shared. He glared at the folder without touching it. Seriously, you made a spreadsheet about our marriage. I made a road map for saving it. I opened the folder and pointed to the first page. We need $4,000 monthly to cover basic expenses. I'm bringing in $3,200. That leaves an $800 shortfall every month, which explains our growing debt. And you expect me to magically produce $800, I expect you to work toward it. 20 hours weekly at minimum wage would cover it. And while you're job searching, I expect shared household responsibilities. I flipped to the next page. This is a division of chores, child care, and household management. He scoffed. So I'm supposed to be your maid now. You're supposed to be my partner. These are basic adult responsibilities, not favors you do for me. His eyes scanned the list. Incredul growing, laundry, grocery shopping. School pickups. I'm not good at this domestic stuff, Caitlin. You know that. This was the strategic incompetence the bus therapist had described, positioning himself as inherently incapable of tasks that millions of adults manage daily. You supervised construction crews of 20 men, coordinating complex projects with million-dollar budgets. You're fully capable of learning to sort laundry and make a grocery list. He pushed the folder away. This is ridiculous. You can't just hand me a contract and ultimatum like I'm an employee. It's not an ultimatum. It's clarity about what needs to change for our marriage to survive. His expression shifted subtly. Cockiness replaced by uncertainty. What does that mean? I took a deep breath. It means I can't continue like this. The physical, emotional, and financial toll is destroying me. If nothing changes, I will take the children and leave. The words hung between us the first time the possibility of separation had been explicitly named. Jack stared at me, searching for signs I was bluffing. You wouldn't, he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. I've already spoken with a lawyer about the process. I've researched apartments in the school district. I've opened a separate bank account. His face palled. You've been planning this behind my back. I've been preparing options because I can no longer live this way. The choice is yours, Jack, partnership or separation. He paced again, agitation visible in every movement. This is insane. You're throwing away 10 years of marriage because I've hit a rough patch. 2 years isn't a rough patch. It's a choice to let me struggle alone while you opt out of adult responsibility. So you've made up your mind. You're leaving. His voice cracked slightly. The first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in months. No, I'm giving us one last chance to fix this. 30 days. Show me consistent effort toward employment and partnership in running our household. If I see genuine change, we continue working on our marriage. If not, we separate. He collapsed back into his chair, anger seemingly deflated. Jesus, Caitlin, where is this coming from? This isn't you. This is exactly me finally standing up for myself after years of enabling behavior that's hurting our entire family. He was silent for several minutes, staring at the folder. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. And if I refuse, if I say this whole plan of yours is controlling and unreasonable, I met his eyes steadily. Then you've made your choice. The next 48 hours were among the most tense we'd ever experienced. Jack veered between sullen, silenced defensive arguments and attempts to recruit allies. He called his mother, who predictably took his side, and phoned me to explain how men need support during career transitions. He texted mutual friends vague complaints about my ultimatums and lack of understanding. I held firm, neither apologizing nor escalating. When the children returned Sunday evening, we maintained a cold civility that fooled neither of them. Emma watched us with anxious eyes while Lucas became unusually clingy. Monday morning, true to my word, I called and cancelled our cable and internet services, downgraded our cell phone plan, and removed all but $50 from our joint account after paying the electric bill. When Jack discovered the television yielding only static, his outrage was immediate. This is childish. Caitlin, punishing me won't solve anything. It's not punishment, it's financial necessity. The money for luxuries simply doesn't exist anymore. The first week was a power struggle of epic proportions. Jack made a show of leaving the house with his resume, then returned, claiming every business had turned him away. He performed household tasks with deliberate incompetence. Shrunken laundry, burned dinners, cleaning that left surfaces dirtier than before. See, he would say with manufactured innocence. I told you I'm not good at this stuff. I refused to take the bait. That's okay. Practice helps, try again tomorrow. By the second week, his resistance tactics shifted. He began playing the victim, sighing heavily while folding towels, wincing dramatically when lifting a laundry basket as though his back might give out any moment. When this failed to elicit sympathy, he tried sporadic cooperation. One day of productive job searching, followed by 3 days of television at his mother's house. The children noticed the changes, confused by their father's erratic behavior and the new chore chart on the refrigerator that included his name. Is Dad sick? Lucas asked one evening. He keeps saying he's too tired to play catch, but then he goes to Uncle Brian's to watch football. Dad is learning some new routines, I explained carefully. Sometimes change is hard for grown-ups too. By week 3, Jack's mother arrived unannounced at our door, determined to mediate. This tough love approach isn't working, she insisted. Jack is depressed. He needs support, not deadlines. I've supported him for 2 years, I replied evenly. Depression explains behavior but doesn't excuse the absence of effort. He's refused therapy, medication, and job counseling. At some point, mental health becomes his responsibility, not mine. She left in a huff, but her visit seemed to impact Jack. That evening, he approached me in the kitchen, expression uncharacteristically. Serious, you're really going to leave if I don't change, aren't you? He asked quietly. I nodded, continuing to pack lunches for the next day. Yes, even after everything we've built together. I set down the knife I was using to spread peanut butter. Jack, what exactly have we built together recently? For 2 years, I've been building alone while you've been a spectator in our life. He had no response to that. The following day, he had a job interview scheduled at a home improvement store. It wasn't in construction management, but would use his knowledge of building materials and tools. The position would provide about 25 hours weekly, not full-time, but a start. The morning of the interview, I found him still in bed at 9:30, covers pulled over his head. Your interview is at 11:00, I reminded him. I'm not going, came his muffled reply. Why not? It's pointless, they won't hire me. I'm overqualified and they'll know I'll leave the moment something better comes along. I pulled back the covers. Then why did you schedule the interview at all? To get you off my back to show I was trying. He sat up, eyes red-rimmed. You don't get it, Caitlin. No one wants to hire a 42-year-old failed construction manager with a 2-year employment gap. You haven't failed, I said. The economy failed, but staying in bed guarantees continued failure. Easy for you to say. Your job never disappeared. Your entire identity wasn't erased overnight. And whose fault is that? You're the one who wrapped your entire identity around one job title instead of seeing yourself as someone with transferable skills and value beyond a specific position. He swung his legs over the bed, anger flashing in his eyes. You think I want to be this person? You think I enjoy watching you work yourself to death while I can't contribute? I think you've become comfortable in helplessness because it's easier than risking rejection. I think you've convinced yourself you're protecting your dignity by refusing lesser jobs when the truly undignified choice is letting your family struggle while you hide. His face crumpled, anger dissolving into something raw and vulnerable. I can't do it, he whispered. I can't face another rejection. I can't start at the bottom again. I just can't. For the first time in our confrontations, I glimpsed the genuine fear beneath his avoidance and manipulation. Not laziness, but terror of failure, of inadequacy, of facing a world that had already knocked him down once. I sat beside him on the bed, not touching but present. The interview is still 45 minutes away. Shower, put on your blue shirt, and I'll drive you. Whatever happens, you'll have faced the fear. That's a victory regardless of outcome. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly and stood. It was a small step, but perhaps the first genuine one in years. The tension in the car was palpable as I drove Jack to his interview. He sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring out the window, hands fidgeting with his resume folder. I kept my eyes on the road, afraid that saying the wrong thing might cause him to demand. I turn around. What if they ask why I've been unemployed for 2 years? He finally asked, voice barely audible, be honest but strategic. The construction industry collapsed. You took time to explore options and upskill, and now you're eager to apply your knowledge in a new environment. He nodded slightly, rehearsing the words under his breath. Do you want me to wait? I asked as we pulled into the store parking lot. No, he said quickly, then softer. But maybe check your phone in case I need a ride back. I watched him walk toward the entrance, shoulders squared with forced confidence. Whether this particular interview yielded results or not, he had taken a significant step simply by showing up. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text, interview done when okay, stopping for lunch before bus home. It wasn't enthusiasm, but it wasn't defeat either. Progress. The following days established a fragile new pattern. Jack attended 2 more interviews, one at a building supply distributor, another at a hardware store. He began handling school pickups without complaint and took over breakfast preparation, though his culinary skills remained limited to cereal and toast. There were still rough moments. I discovered him one afternoon staring blankly at the wall instead of completing the online certification course he'd started. When I asked what was wrong, he admitted, I keep thinking, what's the point? Even if I get some retail job, I'll never make what I used to. We'll never get back to where we were. Maybe we're not supposed to go back, I suggested. Maybe we need to go forward to something different. By the 4th week, Jack received an offer from the home improvement store. The pay was approximately half his former salary for part-time work, with potential for advancement to department manager after 6 months. He accepted with mixed emotions, relief at employment, but embarrassment at the step down in status and income. It's temporary, I assured him. A stepping stone while you continue looking for something that better matches your experience level. What if this is it though? He asked, genuine worry in his voice. What if I never get back to a professional position? Then we adjust our expectations and lifestyle. We've survived worse. The first shift at his new job visibly exhausted him. 8 hours on his feet after 2 years of couch sitting left him with sore muscles and blistered heels. But there was something different in his demeanor when he returned home. A quiet dignity that had been absent for months. It's strange, he said as we prepared dinner together that evening. People actually listened when I explained how to choose the right drill for different projects. I forgot what it feels like to have someone value your knowledge. The household began to find a new rhythm. Jack's work schedule meant he had some weekday mornings free, during which he took over school drop-offs and grocery shopping. His income, while modest, relieved the immediate financial pressure, allowing us to begin addressing overdue bills. More significant than the practical changes was the shift in our relationship dynamic. The power imbalance that had defined the past 2 years was gradually equalizing. We began having conversations instead of confrontations, collaborating rather than colliding. Jack also started therapy, initially reluctant but increasingly engaged as sessions continued. My therapist thinks I've been punishing myself for losing my job by ensuring I couldn't get another one, he shared after his third appointment. Like failing was so painful that I sabotaged myself to avoid risking it again. Does that resonate with you? I asked carefully. Yeah, he admitted, staring into his coffee cup. When the construction company went under, I felt like a complete failure. Like I should have seen it coming or done something to prevent it, even though logically I know that's irrational. These moments of vulnerability and self-awareness were new, creating space for genuine connection that had been absent for years. By the 3-month mark, our landscape had transformed dramatically. Jack was working 35 hours weekly, having picked up additional shifts. He'd completed 2 online certifications related to construction project management and had an interview scheduled with a commercial real estate developer looking for someone with his background. The homefront had similarly evolved. Chores were divided equitably, with Jack taking initiative rather than waiting for instructions. The children responded to the change in atmosphere, becoming more relaxed and engaged. Emma's teacher commented on her improved focus at school. While Lucas's behavior issues virtually disappeared, our financial situation remained tight but manageable. We had caught up on mortgage payments and established a small emergency fund. Jack's mother, initially critical of my harsh approach, now remarked on how much healthier he seemed. I owe you an apology, she told me during a Sunday visit. I thought you were being cruel, but you actually believed in his capability more than I did. The most profound changes, however, were internal. Jack's identity was no longer solely tied to his former position or income level. He found value in his contributions at home and his growing responsibilities at work. His depression hadn't magically vanished, but he was actively managing it rather than surrendering to it. For my part, I was learning to release the hypervigilant control I developed during crisis mode. I could leave tasks for Jack without checking his work or redoing it. I could take an occasional evening for myself without guilt. The crushing weight of sole responsibility had lifted enough that I could breathe again. One evening, about 4 months after our initial confrontation, Jack and I sat on our back porch after the children were asleep. The summer air was warm, fireflies blinking in the yard. We weren't talking, just existing comfortably in shared space. Something that would have been impossible months earlier. I need to tell you something, Jack said, finally breaking the silence. That day when you confronted me, when you showed me the folder with all the finances and responsibilities listed out, I hated you for it. I tensed slightly. I know, I was so angry because you were forcing me to face everything I'd been avoiding, but I also felt something else I couldn't identify at the time. He paused, gathering thoughts. It was relief. Relief, yeah, relief that someone was finally drawing a line. Relief that I couldn't keep sinking lower without consequence. I'd been falling for so long, and you finally said enough. It felt like hitting ground after free falling. He reached for my hand across the space between our chairs. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I'd given up on myself. I squeezed his fingers throat tight with emotion. We've still got work to do, I know, but we're doing it together now. The journey wasn't complete and perhaps never would be. There would be setbacks, challenges, old patterns attempting to reassert themselves. But we had broken the destructive cycle that had nearly consumed our marriage and family. We were building something new from the ruins of what had collapsed, something potentially stronger than what had existed before. 1 year after the bus ride that changed everything, I stood in our kitchen preparing a special dinner. It wasn't an official anniversary or birthday, but I wanted to mark the transformation our family had experienced. As I chopped vegetables, I could hear Jack in the backyard with Emma and Lucas, their laughter floating through the open window as they played badminton the net, a recent weekend project they had completed together. The contrast with our life 12 months earlier was stark. Jack had been working at the commercial real estate development company for 7 months now, having transitioned from the home improvement store after proving himself there. The position didn't carry the same title or salary as his previous construction management role, but it utilized his expertise and offered growth potential. More importantly, he approached it with renewed purpose rather than resentment. Our home had transformed from a tense environment of neglect to a space of shared responsibility and cooperation. The chore chart that once caused such conflict now hung largely unused on the refrigerator, as tasks were naturally divided and completed without prompting. Jack did laundry without shrinking clothes, prepared meals beyond cereal, and took point on school projects and activities. The financial pressure had eased significantly. We weren't wealthy by any means. The debt accumulated during Jack's unemployment would take years to fully resolve, but we were stable. Bills were paid on time. The mortgage was current. and we had even managed to restart modest retirement contributions. The threat of foreclosure that had once loomed so large was now a fading memory. I had received the promotion at work that had previously been denied due to my home situation. With Jack handling his share of family responsibilities, I could fully engage professionally without constant distraction and fatigue. My boss had commented just last week on the quality of my recent project management, unaware of how radically my personal circumstances had shifted. As I set the table for our celebration dinner, I reflected on the less visible but equally important changes. The children had blossomed in our healthier home environment. Emma had joined the science club at school and developed newfound confidence. Lucas, once prone to acting out for attention, now brought home positive behavior reports and had made new friends. Jack appeared in the doorway slightly sweaty from the backyard games. "Need any help? Could you finish the salad while I check on the lasagna?" I asked, still occasionally surprised by how easily we now coordinated domestic tasks. He washed his hands and took over at the cutting board, expertly slicing cucumbers. "The kids are getting cleaned up. They worked up an appetite out there." The casual domesticity of the moment, Jack helping with dinner preparation, the children playing together peacefully, the absence of underlying tension, felt both ordinary and miraculous. Over dinner, we reminisced about the changes of the past year. Jack had initially been reluctant to discuss the difficult period with the children, but our family therapist had emphasized the importance of age-appropriate honesty. "Remember when Dad started his new job and was so tired he fell asleep in his spaghetti?" Lucas giggled, referring to an early dinner after Jack's first week of full-time work. "Or when he tried to make pancakes and they were raw in the middle," Emma added with a grin. Jack laughed good-naturedly. "Hey, I've improved. These garlic bread slices are perfectly toasted. You really have, Dad," Emma said more seriously. "You're different now, better." Jack's expression softened. "Thanks, sweetheart, I'm trying to be." After the children were in bed, Jack and I sat in the living room with glasses of inexpensive but celebratory wine. The couch that had once been his permanent residence was now simply furniture, no longer a symbol of our dysfunction. "I've been thinking about that bus ride," I said. "How different everything might be if I hadn't overheard that conversation." "I wonder about that too," Jack admitted. "If you hadn't confronted me, I might still be on that couch watching our marriage and family disintegrate. I tried to find that therapist, I confessed. I wanted to thank her for unknowingly changing our lives. I took that same bus route several times, hoping to spot her. No luck." I shook my head, but maybe that's fitting. She was a messenger who appeared exactly when needed, said what needed to be heard and moved on. Jack reached for my hand. The messenger mattered, but so did the listener. Someone else might have heard that conversation and done nothing with the information. I was desperate enough to listen. I acknowledged and terrified enough to act. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, reflecting. Finally, Jack spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I've been seeing a pattern in my therapy sessions about why I fell apart so completely after losing my job. It wasn't just about income or status, though those mattered. It was about identity and purpose." I nodded encouragingly. I had defined myself solely as successful provider for so long that when that role disappeared, I felt like nothing. Without that job title, I had no idea who I was or what value I had. He swirled the wine in his glass. "Instead of building a new identity, I retreated into nothingness." "That makes sense," I said, "and it was probably easier to be nothing than to risk trying and failing again." "Exactly. Each day of doing nothing made doing something even more terrifying. It was like I was paralyzed watching myself disappear but unable to stop it." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective on his transformation. He considered the question carefully. The ultimatum broke through the paralysis. "What really changed was rediscovering that I'm more than my job. I'm a father, a husband, a person with skills and contributions beyond a paycheck." This insight reflected what I had observed in his recovery. As Jack reconnected with his multiple roles and sources of value, his dependency and helplessness had gradually dissolved. "I think there's something important there for both of us." I said I had reduced myself to survivor and provider to losing everything else in the exhaustion and stress. "We both got stuck in single identities that weren't sustainable," Jack agreed, "and we're both finding our way back to being whole people. The journey had been painful, but ultimately healing for us individually and as a couple. I had learned crucial lessons about boundaries, enabling behaviors, and my own complicity in unhealthy dynamics. Jack had confronted his fears of inadequacy and failure, developing resilience and a more nuanced sense of self-worth. Our marriage, once defined by imbalance and resentment, had evolved into a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and contribution. We communicated more honestly, shared responsibilities more equitably, and supported each other's growth rather than remaining locked in rigid roles. The most profound lesson perhaps was about the nature of true support. I had believed I was supporting Jack by compensating for his inaction, by carrying the entire load while he recovered. In reality, that approach had enabled his continued dysfunction. True support had meant believing in his capability enough to require it of him to hold him accountable rather than treating him as helpless. As the year mark of our transformation approached, I had reached out to the online forum that had provided such valuable guidance during my darkest days. I shared our story, the confrontation, the difficult transition, and ultimately the healing. Messages flooded in from others in similar situations. Some still struggling, others inspired to take action in their own relationships. "You didn't fix him," one woman wrote. "You stopped carrying him, which forced him to stand on his own feet. I need to do the same." That insight captured the essence of our journey. Jack's recovery hadn't been my accomplishment but his own. My role had been to stop preventing it through misguided protection. Now a year later, sitting with my husband in our reclaimed home, I felt profound gratitude for that rainy evening bus ride and the strangers whose conversation had illuminated what I couldn't see on my own. The road ahead would still hold challenges. Financial recovery would take time, and old patterns might occasionally resurface, but we were facing it together, truly together, for the first time in years. If you've ever found yourself carrying more than your share in a relationship or watching someone you love sink into helplessness, I hope our story offers both hope and direction. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes believing in someone's capability is more important than sheltering them from failure. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? Or perhaps you've been on Jack's side of the equation, needing that wake-up call to reclaim your own power. Share your experiences in the 42 comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to this chapter of my journey. And remember, true partnership means walking together, not carrying each other. Music.